Good morning and a greeting of peace, Om Shanti. Honorable Minister, Chairman of Jayapriya Group have had to leave, but we still have Dr. Pankaj with us, and of course Professor Vyas and Dr. Bhapna and Dr. Prerna. It's my great privilege and honor to be here with you. The little that I've heard here this morning has been very impressive. I've been very deeply moved that the whole subject of development is being looked at from a broader perspective than GDP. It's a very important issue, and perhaps some of you may have thought that happiness is just a personal subject, but in fact it's very relevant to the serious discussions that will be taking place here. So I'm pleased to be able to share input on this. When we look at development and we just see it in terms of figures, then we forget about the human face of development. And in a world which is a world of human beings, I think maybe it should be given priority. And of course, we can see that within the human face of development is the whole aspect of happiness. And what is it that actually interests us? Our interest is well-being of the human being. And so I think that bringing in happiness at this very important aspect is absolutely significant, but it's also an indication of the state of the world. On the one side, I see many energies that are negative forces in the world, but I also see energies that are uplifting the world. Like we heard, whenever there's a moment of crisis, it also represents a moment of opportunity. So I'm seeing that the opportunity is for us to be, so I'm seeing that the opportunity for us now is to be looking at so many different aspects that take in the aspect of the human being rather than just the human. When we think about human being, we have to remember the being, not the doing. So often we've forgotten that it's the being that has to be well, then the doing is also going to be well also. I also want to look a moment at the word sustainability. What is it that connects sustainability with happiness? If I think about happiness emerging as a result of consumerism and materialism, then you can forget about sustainability. Because in fact already we are consuming the Earth's resources about 1.5 times the planet already. And so as the population increases and consumerism increases, where will we be going? There isn't a plan B. We don't have another planet B to migrate to. So what are we doing here while we are on this earth? Looking at happiness on that level is definitely not sustainable. But also, do we actually have any evidence that consumerism increases happiness? I don't actually think we do. I'd like to share a couple of research stories about this. A few years ago, they published a report in Britain in which they had compared the experience of happiness of people in the 50s, and remember this is the period immediately after World War II, and the period of the first decade of the 21st century. And at the time of the 50s, and that's about the time that my parents migrated to England, so some of that is still a memory for me. What they found was that most families didn't own a fridge. Global warming wasn't so evident in those days, so in England you didn't need a fridge. But also, most families didn't have a car, or if they did, maybe it was one car per family. Most families had one television set, and that was a little one, and it was usually black and white. Color television hadn't yet come on the scene.
But when they asked people about the quality of life, most people said that they were very happy. And in the 21st century, what did you find? You found that every family had a fridge. You found that most families had one car, but many families had two. And then you noticed that the size of the television screens had magnified, but also it wasn't just one television set. Now it was television sets in practically every room, but also cars. The cars multiplying and the economy escalating in different ways. But when you asked people the subject of happiness, then that hadn't radically increased. And it seems that, according to research, there's a certain level that we require in terms of wealth to have the comforts that we need, which are essential for life. We need a home, we need clothes, we need foods, we need a certain level of facility. But once you go beyond that level of facility, more wealth does not bring any more happiness. That has been confirmed in a number of different ways. And then when you look at the whole subject of what is happiness, and happiness doesn't seem to depend on wealth, it doesn't seem to depend on external facilities, and so where does happiness lie? Probably everybody here would agree that happiness lies within the human spirit, within the being that is inside. And yet, of course, we don't give ourselves time to explore this dimension. There's another research project that I would like to refer to, and this is actually being published in a book in December 1990, in a book called Happiness, Facts and Myths. And this was by Professor Michael Eysenck, and the question was, what is happiness? How can you tell if you're happy? How important are love, relationships, money in a whole subject? Can happiness last? Is there a blueprint for happiness? Is unhappiness a terminal illness? You can see it was pretty well thought out. Is there a happiness gene within the human being? And so Professor Michael is one of the leading psychologists in Britain, and he bases his research on very scientific evidence and provides realistic insights into these questions. He's a professor of psychology at the Royal Holloway University of London. I'll share with you a synopsis of what he's saying. And when you ask about happiness, and this was research commissioned by the US government, and they wanted to know that if the government understood what makes people happy, they could actually maybe embed the principles in legislation, reduce family and marriage breakdowns, drug taking, crime, etc., and reduce many other social problems. And so Professor Michael asked hundreds of thousands of people across the world a simple question: what would make you happy? What do you think was the number one reply? It wasn't love or peace. The number one answer was money. 100,000 people replied that if they had more money, they would be more happy. Eysenck agreed, yes, maybe that's true. And so he went to the one place in the world, Washington, D.C., where it was known that there were most millionaires living within a square mile. And he found and interviewed many of them. And he told them, you have what everyone wants. You have money. With money, you have power, success, a comfortable home, family, servants, beautiful things. Are you happy? What do you think their reply was? You are absolutely right. You are more enlightened than Professor Eysenck, because what he was surprised, but the majority said no. The millionaires told him, when you have money, you have fear. Fear that your family will be kidnapped, fear of false friends, you won't have time to enjoy your possessions, you become obsessed with accumulating more, you don't trust anyone. Money is a big responsibility and it definitely doesn't make you happy. And so he came to the conclusion that having a lot of money actually doesn't make you very happy, rather it probably makes you unhappy. What do you think was the second most popular answer to the question, what would make you happy? Okay, I'll tell you. Hundreds of thousands of people wanted to be beautiful. Surprise? No, not surprised. This is what's happening in the world today. And Isaac thought to himself, well, okay, maybe this sounds reasonable. With beauty, doors would open by themselves to good marriages, employment, friendships, social circles. Beautiful people would have no trouble advancing in the world. They're always in demand, always the center of attention, never lonely. So he went to the place where there would be thousands of beautiful people. And guess where that was? Hollywood. And he interviewed many beautiful men and women. He told them, everyone wants to be like you. Life must be so happy for you. Are you happy? They replied, I don't need to be giving this lecture, do I? You have all the answers already. So they replied, no. And they told Isaac, when you are beautiful, you are always thinking about every mouthful of food. You're counting calories. And you spend hours in the gym, and you worry about every wrinkle. You wonder, reality, you wonder if you are liked for yourself or just your face and body. And then there are always younger people waiting to take your place. And so there is always the fear of losing what you have. And in particular, you know that with the passage of time, there's going to be a difference. So there's always fear of one kind or another. And so he came to the conclusion that being very beautiful made people very scared. It was actually something that caused fear and unhappiness. And so he interviewed many groups and came to the conclusion, married, single, disabled, abled, intelligent, less so. He came to the conclusion that belonging to a particular group did not make you happy. And so you must be wondering by now, well, what is the answer for happiness? The conclusion of this particular research project was that if you have a good character and personality, that brings happiness. When I have a strong and positive response to the world and to the troubles that come in anyone's life, when I show courage, determination, faith, and truth and love, then there is happiness, and I'll experience that deep state of contentment, which is what happiness is about. And so, with a good personality, whatever is the level of wealth or beauty or success you have, you'll enjoy it rather than the other way round. And so, what can we do to create that inner state of character and good feelings and positivity? Well, one particular way is to be aware of the inner being, my own good qualities, talents, creativity, and potential, and to know that meditation can make the mind strong, peaceful, and clear. I can see beauty within myself, spiritual beauty, and in others. I can give love to the self by valuing and respecting the self, and therefore also give it to others without any expectation of anything in return. And I can truly experience that sense of well-being that is happiness. And so the wonderful thing is that there's a lot of scientific evidence that supports the whole subject of spirituality and meditation and happiness. one of the other things that I've found is that the whole area of psychology, which has been described as positive psychology, and it's an area that's come up just within the last 20, 25 years, no more than that, is an area that definitely supports all the powerful results that happen, A, through meditation, and how through meditation happiness comes, and as a result of that, all the good things we're able to achieve. I asked a woman who's done a lot of research in this subject, and we were sharing a platform together, and she'd just won the Templeton Prize for Psychology at that time. And so I asked her, well, how come it's a subject that's only now being researched? Psychology has been around since the end of the 19th century, actually. It started at that time, but it's only now that we're looking at positive psychology. And she had a very clear answer about it. She said that when there are negative feelings that come, think about any negative feeling, whether it's anger or jealousy or greed or envy, any of these things, they come like a sledgehammer. And when they come, they leave a very deep impact on you. It's easy to measure because there's such a strong, lasting impact on the human being. But when positive feelings come, they're very subtle and they're fleeting. They don't stay for very long. And so it's very difficult to measure them. And it's only been in recent times with the study of consciousness and various related subjects in neuropsychiatry, etc., that they've actually been able to measure what is the impact of positive feelings and emotions. And of course, high on that list is happiness. And so now we have evidence that yes, when there are positive feelings, then this has a very powerful impact on the human being, both in terms of their own state of self-esteem and valuing the self. So you get away from two things that are the scourge of society today: comparison and competition. Why? Because there'll always be someone above me and I'll feel inferior, but there'll always be someone who's less than me and then I'll feel superior. And both are the different sides of the same coin of ego, without any awareness of the real identity of the self. And so in that situation, when I can truly explore who I am and come to that inner state of well-being in which I can experience happiness, then I'm going to be able to maintain that. I'd like to share with you various ways in which we can make sure that we're always moving in that positive track of good feelings. And we can generate our own happiness within the self. Or even I would say that happiness is the oxygen of the inner being. Imagine what life would be like if you didn't have oxygen. It wouldn't be life at all. There wouldn't be. But in the same way, in terms of the human spirit, if I don't have happiness, then I'm walking around, but I'm actually sleepwalking. I'm not walking around in an alive, alert state as a real human being. And so my contribution to others in terms of relationships and to the world is actually non-existent. And so that state in which I'm not happy, I'm seeking to take it from others. That state of taking, again, is a state that indicates the emptiness of spirit. And it's the emptiness of spirit that has actually created the situation in which we've destroyed our own home. There isn't another species on the planet that actually destroys its own home. We've never had that in human history. And yet human beings are doing exactly that to the state of the world. And so it's so important to be able to come back to the stage where the inner being is experiencing that oxygen of happiness, but is also able to generate it, not just maintain it, but continually generate it. Why? Because the conditions of the world have reached such a state of negativity that unless I find a way to be able to generate that feeling of goodness and happiness within, I'm not going to be able to survive pretty well. I know people who have had experiences of giving a lot. I'm thinking about more, not so much in business and industry, but the caring professions. Say, for example, teachers, educators, and also healthcare, different branches of healthcare. But in particular, in these two areas, what we've seen is that where people are continually giving, they reach a state of burnout. And it's very important to be able to find a way to sustain my own inner goodness so that then I'm able to maintain it and still continually give. And that happens when I learn about recharging my own inner batteries. And in order to be able to recharge, I need to give time to myself. Think about what's happening in the world today, where we're constantly expending energy, but we know nothing about generating inner energy. We've got the whole thing about energy outside, and yes, it's important to look at that. And one of the things that the Brahma Kumaris are doing is a project called India One, the first of its kind, in which we're using solar thermal power to be able to create storage facilities to provide 1 megawatt power that can sustain a township of about 30 to 35,000 people. And so within that, the research and development that's happened is interesting. So we're very aware of the external needs of energy and sustainability in that way, but we're even more aware of the inner needs of the human being and the sustainability and development of energy within. And that happens if I give myself time. If I give myself time to go into silence, and through that inner silence and connecting with the source, connecting with the divine, I'm able to draw on an inexhaustible source of power, of love, of joy, and fill myself with that and be able to give that to many others through the whole day. And I'll never get to the point of either stress or burnout. And those are, again, the diseases of today. Stress leads to a lot of different psychosomatic illnesses. Medical people have done a lot of research on this, and it's all there out on the internet for you to see, so I won't give you statistics about that. But to be able to combat stress, I need to be able to recharge my own inner battery on a daily level. The second thing I need to do with that is to be able to feed my mind with nourishing, powerful, uplifting thoughts. Through the whole day, what is it that you're exposed to? There's a lot of criticism that we hear around us all the time about others, about ourselves, about our institutions, about everything that's going on. But yet, if I can find a way to feed my mind something that's uplifting and nourishing, that's going to support me and help me, then that's going to be valuable for me, but also it's going to be valuable to be able to serve others and help others. In India, you have this wonderful concept called karma. It's not just wonderful, but it's a reality. Whatever it is you're putting out is what you get back also. And so if I'm able to share the energy of happiness with those whom I meet on a daily basis, whoever it is I'm in contact with, whether it's the flower seller at my doorstep, whether it's the vegetable seller, whoever it may be, the people I meet at work, instead of competing with them, if there can be collaboration with them, there's going to be excellence and creativity, but also it's going to make sure that our relationships stay very, very stable. And so I'd like to suggest a little formula. Firstly, to invest in the self. And that's not selfishness, that's not the way in which ego works, but if I'm investing in myself time each day, then as the outcome, what I'll probably see happen is that the second thing that develops is relationships are healthy relationships. Sometimes we think about output and result, but in fact what's been found is that results depend on our investment. You know that already. So how do I mean it in the context of happiness? Investment in myself, you know about that. But secondly, investment in relationships. Why do you think they have the whole subject of EQ nowadays? When we started looking at these ideas, IQ was the big thing on the scene. Yes, it's important, but what IQ is doing is looking at just simply logistics, length, breadth, height, so forth, and it's looking at just that side which is very linear, that the left brain is concerned with, but it doesn't look at other dimensions. And so you may have a person who has very high IQ, but we've had many, many examples in recent times where somebody with high IQ, and yet you put them in charge of a project and there isn't the result that you had wanted. The reason being, they weren't able to deal with human relations, right? And so we started looking at the subject of EQ, emotional intelligence, which looks at the subject of the self, but in the context of how I deal with other people. What are the emotions I bring to it? Is it negative? Is it positive? And how can I channel my energy? And so today, from IQ to EQ, the latest thing that people are now looking at is SQ, spiritual quotient, spiritual intelligence. And spiritual intelligence deals with the inner being, getting to know myself. And within that subject of getting to know myself, there's a word that comes in that's very much being linked with development and sustainability. You'll be surprised. And that is the word transformation. In terms of development and sustainability, we're looking at transformation of